Welcome to day 9 of our musical Advent calendar. Today's carol is O Little Town of Bethlehem. I have two different ideas that always come into my head when I'm thinking about this carol, and they are quite opposing. One is about music, and the other is about geography. And since this is a musical Advent calendar, we'll start with geography. I think, as I said in one of the earlier episodes, you tend to grasp onto ideas around Christmas that you learn as kids. And I think because we always saw the nativity scene so much, you get a very tunneled view of the idea of the little town of Bethlehem. I think as kids you almost see just a barn outside of a small hotel in the middle of nowhere, and that's all it is. But as I've grown older, I really got to thinking about this place, which was deemed so important that it was the place that the Messiah was born. Of course, there is the lineage of being the town of David and linking back to the Old Testament. But from a purely geographical standpoint, Bethlehem was always an important location because of what flowed from it. Bethlehem is actually a series of villages, or at the time of Jesus' birth was a series of villages that was built on an aquifer. And later, a fortress was built to guard the water. Bethlehem is where the water for Jerusalem flowed from. It was also located about 90 miles from Nazareth. So to get an idea of walking distance, as Joseph and Mary probably did, although they may have done it on a donkey, you're probably looking at 4 good 8-hour days to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Now, one blog that I read suggested that if they traveled by donkey, it probably would have taken them a lot longer than 4 days. Okay, so back to the music. We have this important location, and it is very much the inspiration for the carol O Little Town of Bethlehem. In 1865, Philip Brooks, an Episcopal priest from Philadelphia, was traveling from Jerusalem to Bethlehem as part of a pilgrimage and arrived in Bethlehem on Christmas Eve. 3 years later, in 1868, he was inspired by the memories of this trip to compose the lyrics for the carol, and his organist at the time, Louis Redner, wrote the music. They used this carol for the Sunday school Christmas Eve service in 1868, and in one of the interviews that he gave, Louis Redner easily admitted that neither he nor Brooks expected that the carol would ever see life past that Christmas Eve Sunday school service. On a side note, the hymn tune that's used in the United States is that written by Redner and recorded much later and famously by Elvis Presley. But in England, the tune is actually Forest Green, which you might recognize as the tune from Voices United, as those of old their first fruits brought. And we know those are interchangeable because in the joke that I played on Reverend Andrew Love when he left for the service where I played all Christmas tunes, that was one of the ones that I changed it to. Last little side note, my late organ teacher, Morley Paget, once told me a story that he was filling in as the organist for a Christmas Eve service, and the first carol up was O Little Town of Bethlehem. And he sat down and the choir stood and he began to play the original American tune by Louis Redner, and nothing happens. The choir doesn't sing, the congregation doesn't sing, so he just keeps playing. And the minister quietly comes over and whispers to him, "Could you please start again with the right tune?" So again, it always comes back to what our traditions are. Thank you for stopping by. See you tomorrow.